Thank you for watching the Housing Oregon YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe. Slide decks from the presenters are going to be available below. Thanks for watching.
Welcome, everybody. This is Lessons from the Field, and so excited to see everyone here. I know it's a very full conference, so understand you've been sitting a lot for the last couple days, and understand if you got to get up, get out of here, get a drink of water, come back. Like, we will not be distracted. These four will continue talking. Come back if you want. Anyway, so we are, come on in. No, no, no. No, it's great. We were just trying to show how committed to schedule we are by getting started very promptly. There's Rachel. There's seats up here in the front, Rachel. All right, we'll get started. So this panel came about because all of our organizations have been involved in the affordable housing world for quite a long time now, decades, many, many decades all added together. And it's a great group to just touch base with, regardless of if we're working on a project together, see what they're seeing, understand kind of the bigger picture of what the market is doing, what they're seeing on projects, what jurisdictions are doing. And, you know, as we touch base with each other over the year, it just came about that, like, I'm hearing the same things from different GCs that I get to work with, different projects, big, small. And we thought, you know what, let's talk about this. I think we all were dealing with a lot of things going on during COVID. And now we're in that, do we say post-COVID? COVID 2.0, whatever this is now, where things are maybe settling, unsure, but definitely is not back to pre-COVID. So what are the things that we're all seeing on projects and want to talk about, and also just have a bigger conversation with this group, because it is such a wonderful time to get to be able to be at this conference and just learn from each other. So with that, shall I pass it? Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Michelle Black. I'm a principal at Carlton Hart Architecture.
Good afternoon. There we go. I'm Afton Walsh with Walsh Construction. I'm a project manager and director of community engagement and outreach. Been in construction for 17 years. Started, actually, one of my very first projects was for an organization called Bridge Meadows, and which is a wonderful organization, combination of affordable housing, senior housing, family housing. And I was a superintendent in the field. And then over the years, worked my way to project manager. And I now get to wear a project management hat, building affordable housing, and then also our director of community outreach and engagement. So I work kind of with all of our teams to ensure that we're meeting our equity contracting, workforce diversity, really spent a lot of time mentoring our small business community, making sure that they can be successful on our projects and grow. So kind of all the different things that I get to do on a daily basis. A little bit about Walsh Construction, just in case you're not familiar with us. We are a general contractor based in Portland, but we work throughout the Northwest. So all the way up to kind of the Canadian border through Washington, throughout the state, and then throughout the state of Oregon, both in our urban regions, but very much in our rural regions as well. And we specialize in affordable housing and community-based projects.
Thanks, Afton. My name is Martin Segura. I'm an associate and project manager at Carlton Hart Architecture. I've been in the profession for 26 years, so the last decade plus at Carlton Hart, pretty much devoted to affordable housing, community-based activism and projects. My first project, because I like that angle, at CHA was NAA Generations down in Southeast Lents. It was a multi-generational project with our friends at LMC and the Native American Youth and Family Association. and that kind of commitment and effort to get that project done kind of helped me drink the Kool-Aid, I guess, in terms of just being devoted over the last decade plus to doing this work.
Thanks, Martin. I'm Andrew Colas, President and CEO of Colas Construction, second generation family owned business. I've been in this business on the books for 20 years, off the books for probably 27 years. My dad started the company, so when I was little, I was just around him all the time. The first project I remember, it was a house on Skidmore. I think it was like 2634. It should have been a tear down. We renovated it, still there to this day, and just really built that passion for this industry that we're all a part of, and love for the work that I do every day. So excited to share with you all some of the insights that we've all been able to gain. It's been really fun prepping for this. As you can imagine, we have had some really good conversations, and we're learning from each other. And I think the most important thing, and that's what we see about the people that are here, it's about sharing knowledge and using that knowledge to really create more affordable housing, because that's what the need is.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle Anderson. I'm Vice President of LMC Construction. We are a multifamily builder here in Portland. Primary focus of ours since day one has been affordable housing, so it's near and dear to our heart. We're actually celebrating our 20-year anniversary this year. It's hard to believe we've been around that long, but so I've been with the company since day one. I actually was the on-site superintendent for our very first project, which was a occupied RD renovation in Canby. We've grown since then to where we're at now. So I've been with them since then. That's my commercial experience. Prior to that, I was in residential construction in Bend, Oregon. So I think I'm going on 30 years of experience now. It's weird for me to say that because I don't think I'm that old, but I guess my friends keep reminding me I am getting gray. So no, excited to be here.
I think it's worth noting that, obviously we have 3 GCs at the table, which is pretty rare. Like, these are direct competitors. And I wasn't sure when I pitched this idea that it would be received that well. I mean, I know there's a lot of camaraderie and everything, but I just had never seen it before. But they all really were into the idea, and I think it shows, and was mentioned our conversations prepping for this. It just really shows how much respect there is for each other, as well as just understanding that it takes all of us, and not just all of us, but all of us, to provide a housing for the state of Oregon and really answer the call to do this work. And so it's been really exciting to do this. Before we get started, can we just do a quick poll of like who's in the room? Any other GCs in the room? Mike, you don't count. How about architects, engineers, designers? Awesome. AHJs? Who else am I? Asset managers? Developers? Financiers? There's Kathy, yeah. Okay. All right. We had a good mix. Yeah, heck, we wrote a good description. All right, so we're going to start with a few questions that we've just in our conversations kind of came into these topics, but then we hope to leave a lot of room at the end for a good conversation with you all and answer questions and just discuss together. So first question is, what trends are you seeing that project teams should be aware of and plan for?
Well, I think we've all talked about it, and you're just seeing the schedule durations of projects as a whole. They've been getting longer, and I think there's a lot of things that we have to think about. Number one, we're just coming out of a 100-year event in COVID, right? So when that happened, it really changed the world as far as construction durations, expectations, supply chain, and then right before that, if we think about it, in 2018, I believe it was the peak of multifamily housing building in Portland Metro. So I think there was some like 1,000 some units being built. And then also remember that we had 3 big school bonds going on. You had Intel building a $5 billion fab. You had huge, in the Dalles, you have a ton of the data centers going on. So really, our market didn't have the labor capacity, and then couple that with COVID and the global supply chain impacts. It doesn't matter who your contractor was. It doesn't matter who your subcontractors were. There was a real impact. So I think us understanding where we were, and then now really understanding where we are, where we're starting to see a lot more stability in the market. We're still having issues with supply chain as far as electrical gear goes. They'll dive a little deeper into that. But what I'd say, as we all talk, we share these stories. I'm a real nerd with Excel sheets, and I'm super competitive just with my competitors. And so I have this spreadsheet that I track every single project. They don't know about it. If you guys got a hold of this, you'd like it. But the duration of every project that I know of, I track it. Like, so every single one of their projects, anyone, and it's easy to find this data, but I just put it on a database. And you can see that from like 2015, like let's say your standard 100-unit apartment building, 5/1, we were able to knock those out in like 14 months. And there's no benefit to us. Like, I know owners are like, oh, you're getting more G's. No, there's no benefit to us to go longer if you think about it, because we make one fee, and you guys always hold our fees real tight. And if you're making that fee over 18 months versus 14 months, if you think about it, per month, we're making less money. And we don't, if we were just motivated by money, and obviously we do this work, that's not the only reason, that wouldn't make sense for us. But if you really look at it, it doesn't help your performers. I think you made such a good point at lunch when you're talking about 6 months, what that does to projects. Like, we understand that it hurts those projects, but I think we all saw this coming, and it's really important as these kind of situations arise. You do want to trust us because we're telling you the truth. There's not a benefit to us to try to get a longer duration project. It really isn't. But there's a benefit to you when we tell you the truth, right? So I think as we go through this whole commentary, it's important for the three of us to be here. And even though we're competitive, like Michelle said, we're telling you the truth, and we're trying to give you the best knowledge going into these projects so you can be the most successful. The good news is I see those durations now starting to like recede. The biggest thing we want to get ahead of, and you're talking about that, right? Yeah, Kyle's talking about electrical gear. He's gonna. I'm not talking about it. See, I'm not talking about. Yes. So I'm gonna pass it to Afton, but I think the biggest thing from today that we hope you all garner from us, like, we really care about this work. You can trust us. We talk to each other, and we're seeing the same kind of things. So I think if you use that and then don't necessarily push back, but say, what can we do to get better? Like, how can we beat some of those longer durations? What are those kind of, and that's what we're going to share with you today. I'm not going to take any other things.
Well, how about I have one comment just to kind of add on. When there's a soapbox, I don't mind standing on it. And then maybe, how about Kyle does the electrical gear, just because it ties perfectly. And I was just going to say, we're talking about maybe immediate things right now, but I never want to miss the opportunity to think, 5, 10, 20 years down the road, and just a big plug for workforce development and how critical. I mean, one of the big reasons we saw a huge drop in labor is that COVID really forced a lot of early retirements, and we had a lot of really skilled trade workers that left the industry, and it's this long-term disinvestment in CTE programs in our schools. And so we have to really start engaging. And a lot of those folks in the room who might do resident services, I mean, there are lots of great opportunities, and, construction is huge living wage jobs and lots of opportunity that isn't necessarily a college path. So that's my quick plug for workforce diversity or workforce investment. Electrical gear, I feel like.
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, That is a very real thing that we're going to be dealing with. Is we've got more people leaving the skills trades than we have people coming in. That's going to be hard to overcome. That's a whole different panel. So next year, we'll do that one next year. Absolutely. Okay, electrical gear. That's kind of been a big topic. Some of you may or may not have encountered that on your own project. You've most likely at least heard of a project being affected by it. That is still a reality. You know, when you get to certain gear components, and it's a complicated issue, and it's not just one manufacturer. It affects every manufacturer. Unfortunately, there's very few that make certain components, and that's part of the problem. So that is a reality that we're still stuck with for a while, at least the foreseeable future. So what do we do about that? Main thing is plan early. This is what I'm telling all my teams, and this goes to every team member can take this advice and incorporate it into your projects. Plan early. If you've got a project that's in pre-construction and moving forward with design, and you have not been in contact with the power company yet and started those discussions of what so we're talking two things, not just our gear that you're purchasing and putting in your building. There's also the power company's equipment, the transformers, and what they need to do on their end to get power to your site. So you got those two issues going on together. So plan it as early as you can. Nothing is too early. So as soon as you know a project's moving forward, you know, get your account opened up, get those conversations going, meet with the power company. Ideally, you've got a electrical engineer involved to help move those conversations along, but at least get that conversation started. And then I'm very big on actually making a detailed written schedule for this. So oftentimes at this early in the process, when we're talking about the power company, that's not the contractor schedule. That's typically either the architect's managing the pre-dev schedule, or the owner's rep is, or the owner. Just make sure whatever schedule you're tracking all of your pre-construction, all of your pre-closing tasks on, clearly identifies what that electrical process is and the timelines to the best of your knowledge. And then just make sure you're reviewing and updating that as you go along. And then as soon as possible, translate that also into the construction schedule and make sure, you know, if you're a contractor, make sure your teams are putting that in their schedules. If you're an architect or an owner's rep or an owner, and you're not seeing that in the schedule that your GC is providing you, ask for it. Say, we want to see this detailed out. When do you need power by? When do we need an electrician on board? When do we need to be processing those submittals and getting that gear ordered? And a lot of times, you know, our recommendation is you're actually looking at engaging an electrical sub early, maybe even pre-closing, maybe even outside of the standard bid process where you're selecting all the rest of your subs, get that electrician on board, get those moving early. I'm going to pass it to Afton now.
I want to talk a little bit about low voltage. So that would be your access control, your security cameras. This is a big trend and shift that we've seen over the last 5-10 years. Just in general, buildings used to be simpler. I think that is one thing that is driving cost, it's driving schedule. Technology has moved us forward in a lot of amazing ways, but it also adds a lot of complexity. I think asset managers in the room probably know, and you know, managing security camera systems and access control, it can create a lot of big problems at the very end when you're trying to close a building, get it completely leased and occupied, and the doors don't work, the fire alarm doesn't work. It's just very complicated, and much more so. And it's constantly changing. Every few years, the systems completely change and evolve. So I think our advice on this one is to start talking about it really early. It's something that needs to really engage your maintenance staff, facilities, asset managers, a lot of your, you know, not just your development teams, but those who are actually going to be operating in the buildings. And if you have a large portfolio of projects, it's an area where having consistency across your portfolio can be really critical. So, I mean, just imagine, you know, we hate having 17 different logins to different apps on our phones. Then imagine you have that on every building times however many. And it's just, it can be really costly to manage. And these are things that also can be very costly to replace. We've been talking a lot about, ongoing operations and maintenance of buildings. So I think in engaging, if you have a like an IT consultant or your internal IT, especially in buildings that have a lot of services, sometimes if it's a really straightforward housing with maybe a common room. That's kind of one scenario that might be simpler, but as soon as you start layering multiple service providers who might have different firewall needs and, IT needs and how all those different systems talk to each other, bringing all those folks to the table early so it can get coordinated and you don't have issues on the back end.
Yeah, I think layering in the complexity that Afton mentions and the availability that everyone's speaking to and schedules, and even the workforce piece, we're seeing ME&P systems, aside from low voltages, get more complex as well. And so ME&P is just mechanical, electrical, plumbing. It's your heating, it's your cooling, it's your toilets, it's your water heaters in your units. It's all of those things. And because we've had different ways to deliver those designs to the field, we've done design build, design assist, or full design. We're seeing some trades not being able to handle the design end as much as they used to because of the workforce piece that all of you are mentioning. And so on our side of the table, on the design side, that means we're bringing mechanical, electrical, and plumbing consultants on earlier because that design needs to live with our team as opposed to handing it off. It doesn't mean that design build is still not a viable option for some delivery messages, but its scale at 116 units, it's like we may not have a trade partner that can handle that because they might be bringing a COVID certification and have not the kind of wherewithal and the design piece under their umbrella right now. And then the energy codes, just like the last 5 years. I think as recently as like 10 years ago, we were still doing like trickle vents and windows to get fresh air into our residential units. And then we were having tenants put tape over those windows because they didn't want the cold air in the winters that we have. And now we're seeing significant climate change and heat dome events that are affecting our residents and very vulnerable populations. And we're talking about adding cooling to every single space. Whereas again, 10 or 20 years ago, it was just, yeah, let's put a heater in the room and walk away. Ventilation requirements have increased. ASHRAE has continued to put more requirements on us for the good with well intentions. Buildings are tighter, which means we're mechanically ventilating now because they're so tight, which means we have more ductwork and soffits in the units that are pushing and pulling air all the way around. And newsflash, another ASHRAE is going to hit us in 2024 in terms of the latest update with even more layering of information. It's supposed to be, well, according to the state, it's supposed to be released in 2024, but we'll find out more after their next kind of meeting next month. So solar, I mean, it's kind of tertiary or outside of typical mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems, but most of the housing work we do has to respect that. Renewable energy is a reality. If the grant money comes through and projects get PV, our teams are having to work and put in as many placeholders and the kind of PV and EV ready systems that have to account for if and when that gets added to a project. Those things take up space. And sometimes if they're inside of a building, they generate heat. And that means another mechanical system that's having to generate that and deal with that room. And all that planning early and often, it's just, we're seeing more of it on the front end for the exact complexity and workforce issues that this group is talking about right now.
A plug for solar for the lenders in the room and grant makers and such. If you can fund solar from the very beginning, that is really, really critical because it is so integral to the design. Getting funding for solar after we are fully permitted and under construction is not the way to do it. It's inefficient, it costs more money, and it can create a lot of rework and delayed schedules. So if you can work it into the projects from the very beginning, that is a huge win-win across the board.
All right, guys, next question. What things do you see as having the biggest project impacts? That could be scope or cost or schedule or all of the above. Martin?
Well, let's start with one of the first decisions, and that's challenging sites. We've had some great opportunities and privilege to work with some great nonprofits and clients that get free land. I think all of them will say there's no such thing as free land. It comes with something, and it could be a kind of agreement in place, but what we're seeing on our side is it comes with maybe access issues. And by that, I mean connections to the street or connection to utilities. It comes with topography because there's a 15-foot drop in grade from the south to the north. It comes with natural features like wetlands, which might mean state processes and approvals that have to be built into schedules and have their own design team kind of managing. Those access issues bring conversations with the AHJ on right-of-way improvements. It might mean the state, depending on the road that's right in front of your future home site. What does that scope of work look like? Where does that line stop in terms of, okay, we're improving our sidewalk, but are we also improving the ADA ramps across the street? How far does the survey need to go to make sure we have enough information to have in our hands to make sure, okay, where is the center of the right-of-way? Okay, now we need to go a little further because the right-of-way improvements are increasing in terms of our coordination with the city and things like that. The process can't be understated enough. When we work with jurisdictions at the state level or local level to get approvals in place, that often brings a price tag. That in terms of getting that information early and often to our partners and our clients is kind of critical to keep things moving forward.
Yeah. Building on that, obviously we talked about a lot of the MEPF coordination items that are really critical to the overall schedule durations. Kind of building on what Martin talked about with the free land. I think it's really important when you are able to access a piece of free land, get the phase 1 and phase 2, right? Don't just do the phase 1 because that's going to tell you some information, but the phase 2 is going to tell you if you need to proceed with deep foundations. It's going to tell you if you have contaminated soils. It's going to, well, it will help to tell you, right? Because the phase 2, sometimes they miss it. It depends on how many bores they do. But we're seeing a lot more projects that we're doing infill, inner city, that are donated jobs, and we're having to put deep foundations in. And so what a deep foundations is, for those that don't know, just imagine you're drilling massive steel, putting it to bedrock. It costs a lot of money. That's the simple explanation of it. But when you're doing that coupled with contaminated soils, so when you have those drill rigs, you're extracting soils. So if you have contaminated soils that you're extracting, and then you also have contaminated soils that are a part of your overall dig, and you're not planning for that, it's a huge cost. Like it's not only a huge cost, but it's also time. So we've had a couple sites, and we were lucky that the owners were responsible, did phase 2s. We were able to plan for it, but there's been projects that we've run into where the contaminated soils were unidentified. And you know, when you have too much of it on certain sites, there's pretty much Hillsboro's where the dirtiest of the dirt goes. And there's only a certain amount of soil that you can export in a given day. And so even the duration of your project's going to change depending on the level of contamination on your particular site. And we've seen it's hard to kind of when you present as a contractor the cost to remove the contaminated soils, the sticker shock factor for owners is they don't want to believe it, right? They don't want to believe it. There's no way per cubic yard it costs that much and it's going to add this much time. But it really does cost that much. And maybe what you think about is, okay, I got this land for free. Now I'm spending $1 million to clean it up, right? So maybe the way you comp it to make yourself feel better is calculate that $1 million over the square footage of the land. And they're like, okay, that was still a good deal on the dirt. Whatever it may be, you don't want to not include those costs in your contingency or have us hold it. However you want to do it, you want to know that it's there, and also that duration, because it's what we don't want to do is give you the worst case scenario in our baseline schedule. But what we do want to do is prepare you that if it is the worst case, it's not only a money issue, it's a time issue, because you can only move a certain amount of dirt. Hillsboro will only accept a certain amount from a certain number of contractors per day. So sometimes on projects that are really highly contaminated, we're only able to move X amount of trucks out, whereas if it wasn't contaminated, we can move double that amount. So when you think about a duration of a dig that maybe would have been a 3 week, now you're doubling that to 6 weeks. Well, that's time, right? So it's really important to heed the advice of your contractors. When we make recommendations on how much you should carry in your allowance, you all make the decision. Do you want us to carry it? Do you want to carry it? But make sure it's somewhere. Don't plug your ears and pretend like it may not be realized. Now, if we get out of it and it's not as bad as we thought, that's the better for us all. But I think it's a really bad idea to go into soils that you think might be better than they are, and not plan for it. And then the deep foundations, it's the same thing. I think it's always a good idea to allow your contractor to go out early, pick one of the deep. I mean, there's really maybe four, but 3 companies in town that are going to do those deep foundations. And it's worthwhile getting them on board to be a part of your team as early as possible, because that's one of the first things that we're doing. And if we plan for that, we schedule for that, and you get out and you know what to expect, and then we hit that, it's going to make the project flow much better, not only for that first scope, but for all the scopes that follow afterwards. It's really important. Of course you can.
And then it'll go to Afton, who is actually going to talk about deep foundations. You get your geotech report too. Pay for that early on. Get the borings done. Ideally, select a geotechnical engineer that understands and has experience with that specific location, because they can change drastically from one site to the next.
So I think just to remind everyone, the question was, what it has the biggest scope, cost, and schedule impacts. And I think you're seeing we're sort of starting from the ground and working our way up. And so I'm going to touch on our foundations, the concrete and then the structure. And predominantly what is being built in this room is wood. So, our concrete footings and foundations, and then our wood structure. And I think of this a bit as function and program then translates into what do we build? What are the unit mixes? How much common space? What are the services? And so really being thoughtful, because the simpler we can make our structures, the more money we'll have for durability, things that, really impact your residents. And so I like to say, and I'm looking at Mike Steffen over there, who has beat this into us and taught us so well that, saving money on things that no one sees and no one touches is really critical. I also think this is an area where your architecture partner is incredibly important. There are some really amazing architects, Carlton Hart at the top of that list, who know affordable housing and know wood construction. And that is really, really important. And having them bring on a structural engineer who also knows affordable housing and wood construction is really, really critical, so that we are not over designing foundations unnecessarily, and that people have, I think some people think that engineering is, there is only one way to do things. There are lots of ways to do things, and that are all safe and meet all current codes. And so making sure that someone has an expertise in this type of construction and engineering and design is really important. A lot of extra concrete in the ground is not going to allow you to deliver your services any better. And so making sure that we're right fitting those scopes of work, I think, is really important. And thinking about cantilevers just in your design, program obviously is critical. You need to have the space to deliver your programs, but if you can do it in architecturally beautiful ways that don't have the building have huge cantilevers, walls stack on top of each other. If you ever look at a set of preliminary drawings and they start talking about structural steel in a wood building, that's when you raise your hand and say, can we do that differently? Because that is very expensive. So just thinking about ways to simplify your structure.
Just one thing to build on what Afton was talking about with the concrete. So there's a lot of different ways and looks of concrete. And like she was saying, a lot of it is buried. But when you're talking about that 12-inch or 16-inch stem wall, it also depends on the group that you're working with as far as the architect. So we could pour that monolithically, which is going to be more efficient for us from a crew standpoint. and should create cost savings. But if we're penalized because it's not the perfect finished concrete, right? Then we're going to say, you know what? Depending on who the architect is or who the group that we're working with is, we're going to just go ahead and pour the footings and then we're going to form the walls, which is going to be a little more expensive. But if we're looking at being penalized, if there's a little hole or, gouge, because you just can't, you can't finish it the same way if you monopore. And I'm sorry, it's getting technical, but basically, monopore is when you do the footings and the forms for the wall all in one pour. So you're not able to pack the concrete at the same level. So it doesn't look as beautiful as if you pour the footing and have a stem wall. But it looks totally like fine. Like it looks good. But like I say that to all the contractors because we've all been punished for like not having that perfect wall. But we're like, we saved you $50,000 by doing it this way. So you can't expect it to look the same way if it's a formed wall. So I think we also have to like sometimes step away, and every human being has this problem. It's pride and ego. Like we have to step away from that and think about who we're building these for. And I'm not saying that we're going to deliver crap. Like when if I was able to show you the difference of these two walls, like most people would understand. But like if you've been punished by an architect that the wall wasn't perfect, you're like, I'm just going to go ahead and form it for. So sorry, that was like, I'm not saying that she punished either. I'm not.
No, I think that's a great point, Andrew. And I do think and we'll get into this a little bit later, but just I had to say something. I do think it speaks to a great team, putting together a great team that's open to having that conversation. And you have a good environment where someone can say, Andrew can say, Michelle, for real, like, how many people are going to see this? If it were, yeah. Right. And then there's sometimes where, as an architect, like it really is an impact that you can't, like, again, we don't have to get into nitpicky, but I think having that full conversation about the areas where the design is flexible or something, but like you need that robust conversation early to be able to really feel the impacts of that.
Sounds like an excuse to me. LMC projects never have problems with concrete finishes, but
Okay.
all right. The next one I've got on the list is, unfortunately, you have no control over, and that's utilities and right-of-way. And both of those can have drastic effects on the cost of your project, especially cost per unit, cost per square foot, especially on the smaller projects. If you've got a 40 unit or 30 unit or 20 unit deal with significant utility and right-of-way work, that's going to start looking like a much more expensive project than one that looks, it's the identical building on another site, similar to, unfortunately, some of these issues can combine on each other and they'll happen on the same site, which is kind of a perfect storm, worst case scenario. So you can't do anything about it, but what you can do, and you're going to hear us talk about this on multiple issues, is plan early, try to get the information you can early. What's really hard for us is when we're brought on early on in a project, which we've talked about this we've heard in multiple sessions yesterday and today, the value of having your team together, working collaboratively early on. It's really tough for us when we're brought in early and we understand you're trying to put the deal together. You're trying to understand what's this going to cost. We don't know what the utility work's going to involve. We don't know maybe what the right-of-way improvement requirements are going to be. Really tough for us to cost estimate based on that. So just the sooner you can get those conversations going with your civil engineer, with the utility companies. We talked about power in terms of schedule and lead times, but also scope of work. Are you moving power lines? Are you undergrounding, putting vaults in? Where are you going to tap into sewer and water? It's not all that uncommon for us to see a project that's got to run a sewer line, 300 feet past the property. It happens. So understanding where those utilities are and how you're going to tie into it, having the conversation with the Public Works Department to try to understand to the best of your ability, what are they going to require for right-of-way improvements, half-street improvements. Short of that, what are neighboring properties? Is there anything else in the area that you can look to for, some kind of precedent to at least base some assumptions on while you're fleshing out, finally figuring out what the requirements really are going to be, because it's all a process, and we understand you're trying to do the best you can with the information you have at the time, and you're not going to have all of the information until you've got time to go through the whole process. So it can be frustrating for everybody. And one of the main, one of the best things we can do to help is carry some allowances and not assume best case scenario. So getting your GC and your architect working together to try to help identify what reasonable allowances should you carry, not just assuming best case scenario, and hopefully fed by information, as much information as you can get on the real conditions.
All right, I promise the next two questions are going to be quicker answers so we can open it up, right? We get together and we just keep talking. All right, so what project or team characteristics make for successful projects?
I think it just starts with a collaborative team. I think everybody on that team, architect, general contractor, owner, if there's an owner's rep, everybody has to understand they're working for the project, right? I think too often people feel like I'm working for the owner, you're working for the contractor, the project is who we're all working for, right? And so when that is the goal, then every decision that I make as the contractor, or he makes or she makes as the architect, or the owner makes or the owner's rep makes, it needs to be about the project. And there's been this common theme that we've been talking about, pre-planning, like utilities. That's something that if you have a great owner's rep on your team, that should be the thing you focus them on for the first 6 months of the project. Like, get to the person, because the other thing that we all should know, there's like one person like at PP&L and PGE. There's like one, and we all know who they are, and we're all fighting for that same person. Like, it's amazing. Utility companies print money, but they have one person that does all this work. So like, focus on that, because that will help set up the project. That helps your architect know, how large do I have to design my electrical room, right? That helps your MEPF team understand, what size gear do I need to order? That helps your construction team price everything out accurately, right? That just helps everybody. So I think that's number one. And then, as Michelle said, number two, it's about a relationship. And I think it's a perfect example when we're talking about the concrete, in that there's been projects where we lay those things out, because it's really important to be clear on expectations. And I remember there's a project that we did, it was all 12-inch stem walls, and then there was, at like the front of it, there was an 18-inch. So they decided on that front part, we would form and pour the walls, because they wanted those to be like really pretty and neat and, fancy, and we understood it. But in the end, we still were able to save like $60,000 on the rest of it. And I promise you, nobody noticed that part. And we were able to add that value into the interior parts of the units. So everybody, again, it wasn't us just being like, let's save money. That gave the architect and the owner more budget to add art to the building. So when we think about those kind of like approaches, it's being collaborative. And it can't just be during the good times, right? I think it's most important when you run into that unexpected hurdle, which LMC doesn't, but the other contractors that are in the real world that do, we plan for these things, right? Because if you plan for the opportunities that are going to come up that aren't perfect, because we're in an imperfect world and we're in an industry that we are dealing with hundreds of people all the time. When you run into those situations, that's when you want to just pull yourselves together even more and keep that collaborations. And that's how you get to the success of the projects. Kyle, in all your greatness, please share the vision to us all.
All right. Well, my point piggybacks quite well on Andrew's point. As you're working as a team, be solution oriented. Come to the table with solutions, not just a problem. Michelle was on a panel yesterday that was talking about how to deal with construction conflicts when there's an argument or a dispute on a project and how to collaboratively work through that. And being solution oriented is a huge part of that. And that goes to the whole team. I'll start with the GC. We pound into our people. A great common example that you've probably heard before is when you issue an RFI, have a suggestion, have some options, have something other than just a problem there. Another great example would be if you do encounter an electrical gear delay. Oh crap, gear's 52 weeks out and we need it in 30 weeks and we're looking at postponing the completion of a project by months. We should be immediately looking at what's option B, what's option C, what else, desperately searching for what else we can do to mitigate that delay, not just coming to the table and saying, oops, there's a delay. So, specific examples for us would be talking to other manufacturers, talking to other trade partners. We've had an instance where we met with the power company and the electrical engineer and the electrician on site, and they were able to redesign something to make equipment that's more readily available work, things like that. So I think that just kind of goes across the board for every team member. I'm hearing over and over again at this conference the struggles our clients are up against. They are having to hustle and get creative and grind. We've got to be doing the same thing with them, every team member.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a bad idea. I often, when I am sort of working through a challenge on a project, I'll always sort of preface it like, so this might sound crazy, but what if we do this? And, throw everything out there because you never know what might actually solve a problem, and with the right people at the table, what you could work through. So the one I get to talk about on this topic of sort of team characteristics is discuss challenges early, even if they're really hard. I think one thing we often see, and it's in human nature, we all want things to go perfect or to go the best that they could go. Well, reality is, based on a lot of the challenges we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes, that there's a lot of things that could throw a wrench in that. And so planning and sort of expecting things to not go well and sort of planning for worst case in your budgets and your schedule. We don't have to go, totally doomsday, but I think thinking that everything will be perfectly rosy, you will get yourself in trouble. I think of this as a perfect example with value engineering, or VE. Some people talk about target value design, but really what happens if your budget from an early point is off, maybe you are 20% over budget for what you think works in your performa, by kind of just kicking that can down to the next iteration and not making any really hard conversations, maybe some big decisions, it's not going to just miraculously get better. And what happens is if you get to the end, so you're maybe going into like a permit set of drawings and you still have this big budget gap, so you haven't kind of right-sized your budget from the very beginning, the whole design team, the architects, we've all seen this, will spend so much time value engineering. So we'll be racking our brains. Okay, what if we do this way? What if we do it that way? And what we're not doing when we spend hours and hours and hours pricing things 10 ways to Sunday to try to get them to be less expensive is we're not actually focusing on how do we build this building the best way at its most fundamental. And I don't know if you've ever gone through a project that had a really intensive value engineering. It kind of never goes well. All the way to the very end, you kind of feel that ripple of that VE all the way to close out, just because we only have so much time. And when we spend all of our time trying to figure out how can we squeeze just a little bit out of this, we don't really focus on the big things about executing the project really well. And the architects don't have the same amount of time to make sure that all their basic drawings get really completed thoroughly. Subs don't have the time to really do good project planning. So I would just say have those hard conversations really early. And if you have to make some big decisions that can be hard to keep your project moving forward, have those. I know they suck and we don't want to do it, but do it early. And your project will still be a huge success. And when the residents move in 14 months or whenever it is, I think you'll forget that you had to make those really hard decisions when you see all the residents, coming home for the first time.
Yeah, and riffing off of the communication and the hard decisions and conversations that have to be had from our side of the table on the architecture side, we want that transparency. We want to know as soon as something is an issue so we can be part of that solution-oriented conversation. Because if you've heard the term OAC, the three big kind of entities that are kind of running through construction, the owner, the architect, and the contractor, all three of us need to have the best information in our hands at any one time to be solution-oriented. So it's having transparency with the communication, it's getting it in a timely manner, not sitting on it for a week, not that anybody does, but as soon as something becomes an issue, it's like how quickly can we adapt and respond to it, so we can share it and everyone understands the pain points, what's critical path, who's owning the issue. It could be as simple, and we've done this, I think, with all of our partners up here, where like every OAC meeting, because we're meeting weekly to talk about what's going on, we might just have a procurement issues line item. We may have none right now, but just the fact that that exists on every agenda that we talk about every single week is like when the elevator issue comes up, it's right there. It's like we're not hiding anything. ThyssenKrupp just called us and said they can't do this. They're going to do this instead. Okay, what is plan B, to Kyle's earlier point? What is plan C? How do we pivot? What can we live with? Do we have to talk to the city? Okay, well, CHA is going to go talk to the TCO person about this. Colas is going to chase this relative to the available timeline. Like, how are we, again, back to the solution-oriented, serving the project, trying to get to the end of the road?
And that was a totally hypothetical elevator delay that Martin and Andrew may or may not be involved with right now. All right, so last question is, and this came out of, again, we're having these big conversations and there's only so much that your architect and GC can do, right? But we're working all together in this big ecosystem creating affordable housing. And there are things that if we could change, we would change. And so the question is, if you had a magic wand and could change something about the process of affordable housing, what would it be?
Well, since we're talking elevators, I think there should be a lot of standards that are unique for affordable housing and permitting and codes and everything, because on their title in general, like you're mandated to stay as affordable. So when it comes to elevators, I think there should be a preference for elevator inspections. Again, this is something that a lot of people don't realize, but there's a group that does elevator inspections and they decide when they're going to inspect. It's not like your normal jurisdictions where you call them and the next day they show up. It could be 2 weeks, it could be 3 weeks, it could be I'm coming next week and I didn't like the way it looks, so now I'm coming in 3 weeks. It's one of those things that I think we as a state could do much better. I'm not trying to gain any enemies with the elevator inspectors. So if there's any, we love you dearly and we like working with you and we love when you show up. But it is something that you just can't predict. And I think it's really important for us to think about those things, because 3 weeks for an inspection when you're at the end of a project, that's too long. Like, that's 3 more weeks that the people that desperately need this housing aren't able to move in. And we've had the conversation, it's with all of us. And then the other thing, if I could wave a magic wand, I see some bankers in here. These trailing lien releases are like so ridiculous. Have any of you ever not finished a project? Like 20 years, 60 years, 30 years. We've all always finished projects. These trailing lien releases are so onerous, especially we're trying to help get 30% of the contractors now that we're trying to help grow. So minority women-owned businesses. That is a huge obstacle, but sometimes you think the obstacle is because of the minority or women-owned business. And oftentimes it's because ThyssenKrupp or Schindler, they don't care about turning in their trailing lien release because guess what? They don't do anything until you pay them 50% down to even pick up a submittal. So for them, not turning in that lien release doesn't matter, but that can delay the payment for the subcontractor that really needs it. So then we end up fronting them. Like, we sign a lien release, we give it to you, we're certifying it, we all have payment and performance bonds, and everything gets done. So that if I could have a magic wand, all three of us would have to do is give you a lien release, and that's it, and then we're done. And if there won't be any problems, I promise. That's another one.
All right, you went way off script there.
Bother me.
And inspections in general, not just the elevator one's a big one, but we're seeing a huge impact with just city inspections, just getting your cover inspections, getting your electrical finals, and just getting rolled to the next day and the next day. Those are actual impacts that are hard to realize because they happen in small increments, but then you look at the totality of them and hey, you've just lost a week or two on your project just based on not getting schedules when you needed them in the critical path. So mine is not, this is the topic of waving a magic wand, and mine's really not so magic because a lot of this is already happening and is possible, and that's getting submittals processed earlier than notice to proceed and getting items geared up. I think what might be the magic wand part of it is actually the ability to place an early order and pay funds for something, or even just commit to an early order. I know can be challenging doing that ahead of closing. So I think the most important thing, we're gonna go back to me harping on early pre-construction planning, getting your submittal and procurement log. Ask for that early if your GC is not already presenting that early. So you've actually got a roadmap showing what do we need to order when. We can get the architect queued up to be processing submittals early and communicating with them of what that's going to look like. So we're not just surprising them with, hey, oh crap, we need a electrical submittal processed ASAP. Yeah, so I think just as a team, looking more and more at doing a better job prior to closing and prior to notice to proceed to make sure we're geared up to hit the ground running.
Okay, I think this one most people probably have heard this. So, I'm going to repeat it, but I think it is good to be top of mind, especially when you're talking to maybe legislators or someone who they like to. Someone used the term yesterday, silver bullet. So maybe it's not a silver bullet, but it's something that's fairly actionable. I think is permit durations. Depending where you are across the state, obviously it's very different. City of Portland, Beaverton, Medford, Eugene, small rural communities. I mean, it's really all over the board, but sometimes they're really long, 6-9 months to get a permit. And if we're talking about delivering on the governor's housing goals, those 6 to 9 months of delay are a huge deal. It is very reasonable that a jurisdiction could turn around a permit in 3 to 4 months. And that gives us enough time from the time the drawings are completed to get ready, gear up. I think closing should be able to happen roughly in that time frame. Obviously, there are, factors that can vary there, but if we could call up our city government officials and say, affordable housing needs to go through permitting in 3 to 4 months, that would make a huge impact.
Yeah, and just keeping the theme off of moving stuff kind of early and helping us with the overall schedule and timeline. Like selfishly, again, from the design side of the table, we want more information. And the good example that I'll give is like in a rehab, we've often had to skirt the line with our developer and nonprofit clients to, are we avoiding a choice limiting action? If I want to open up a wall to see what's going up above the ceiling in order to plan for it, I have to kind of skirt a line with our client to make sure we're not doing too much to reflect a change at the state level. It's like, oh, you performed a choice limiting action. And when really it's coming from a forensic standpoint, we need that information. And it could be, to Kyle's point about releasing funds early on the pre-development side, I would love the sprinkler sub to be on board earlier than they have been. It's been a delegated design item for so long, but getting them early, we understand, okay, do we have a fire pump? No, we actually have hydraulic calculations to support that. Great, we don't have to provide a space for that in the building. move on to the next issue. And getting some of those trades that are highly specialized, on board early. It could be fall protection and sprinklers. Those are the first two that pop to mind, but they're kind of all built into how do we get that information in our hands so to Afton's earlier point, we can provide more complete planning and documentation to our general contractors here so they can hopefully execute for you guys.
Which means more accurate pricing for all of you lenders who want price certainty. So
win-win. All right, that's the conclusion of our prepared questions. Any questions from the audience? If you just shout them out, then I can repeat it for the people online.
It would be great to hear from, and I think developers, especially new developers, are real worried about that. And how will we handle that? And, we don't know anyone in our area of the state. It would be great to hear from folks at the table around how you all are working to create those kinds of opportunities from the very beginning.
I'm going to try to paraphrase that. So I believe the question is about how does everyone at this table go about meeting the MWESB goals for their projects and giving some advice to people that may be doing that for the first time. And I think it might be helpful to hear what it's different from metro to rural type projects, because I think it looks different.
So it can be a challenge in rural areas for sure. Broad outreach is the best I can say. Getting into the communities early, getting notice of the project out there, getting some feelers out there, going to meetings, doing everything we can to make sure we understand, what subs are available in that area. The bigger issue for me that I've seen is how are we supporting these firms? There's only a finite number of COVID certified firms. And I think we've all kind of experienced the last couple of years seeing a lot of those firms strained from the amount of work thrown at them and the priority thrown at selecting them. So they end up, the reality is some of them took on more work than they were prepared to handle. That's not unusual. It's hard for people to say no to things, especially when things are going good. And layer onto that the shifting timelines. So it's very often you can have a sub select a couple of projects and works for their pipeline, but then by no fault of their own, the timelines shift, and all of a sudden those projects they've got to be at 3 different places at once, and they didn't plan for that. So I think a huge part of it is supporting our co-bid firms to make sure they can be successful, because I don't want to see us throwing work at them, getting them on board, and then just setting them up for failure. We've got to be prepared to actually help them succeed and grow. So that's a big push that we've been doing.
Go ahead and jump in actually, because on the design side of the table, we have a big spreadsheet like Andrew was mentioning before. We're tracking COVID certified firms that work for us on civil side, on landscape, on mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all the consultants we typically carry under our umbrella and we work with across the state. And this is another plug for Claudia Cantu at OHCS and the kind of self-certification program, just kind of really being committed to that DEI mentality when we work and put together teams on the design side of the table. Our firm has actually also worked in smaller capacity, almost on the workforce, kind of mirroring what our friends here do all the time on the general contractor side, is where we've taken a kind of emerging small business on the interior side and given them a piece of scope that we would typically carry. So that they can get that experience and time to execute and try to like, okay, we're going to be here. I've been back to really enforcing the support piece and kind of help you along the process, but you're going to be in charge of this piece. in terms of getting experience to working in affordable housing, getting experience to working in construction, and we're really trying to do more of that as well.
I agree with everything that's already been said. I also, there's a theme, plan early. You know, one way that we approach it is we put together really detailed contracting plans from the very beginning, which is at conceptual stage, and start thinking from the beginning, okay, who are, you know, all the trades that we know are out there, what type of work can they complete? Is this a good project for these 3 or 4, you know, subs, minority women-owned subs? Start talking to them. If you just get to your GMP and you send the bid out into the world and hope it comes back and you hit 30%, that's not going to happen. You have to build relationships. You have to call subs. You have to make sure that you are doing, I think, doing both really intentional one-on-one outreach to specific subs you have spent years developing relationships or maybe just met at a conference. And then also, obviously, you know, screaming it from the rooftops, but you have to do both approaches, the wide net and the really targeted outreach.
Yeah, I think that I agreed with everything that everybody's talked about. The off script of these trailing lien releases just came up. We have our executive meeting every Monday, and our controller was talking about how onerous it is for those subs. And we have like our company is very much built around supporting the growth of those firms. And so when you create these inherent barriers for them to get paid, like subs need to get paid because you got to think when you're growing as a business, that payroll doesn't stop. So it's weekly. So these companies are turning payroll every week. And obviously, as a company, because we're fortunate enough to be the size that we are, we're always going to front those companies. But like, we're not a bank. Like, we're not getting financing. We shouldn't have to. And I think that our partners need to understand, for this to work, it's not just about that minority firm or women-owned firm. It actually is creating more competition, which in turn will create better value because there will be more subs in the marketplace, which in turn gets you better pricing. So just from a business standpoint, it's not just feel good like, hey, we help this company. No, you're creating businesses that now are going to be in the marketplace that are going to compete. So I think about like one of our HVAC contractors. Well, when you look at HVAC, that's a very specialized type of work. And most of the big players, they've been around for 50 plus years, which means they've had relationships with their suppliers for 50 plus years. When you're an up and coming HVAC contractor, you're not going to get that line of credit to buy the very expensive supplies that go along with HVAC. So what do you have to do? You have to front that money. Well, you have to order it, right? So if you don't have the money to put the down payment to front that, whereas your competitors have a line of credit, you're always losing. And so when we have those conversations, like I've personally signed guarantees to help those subcontractors get their first lines of credit, that's a huge risk to me. I'm willing to do it because I want to see this market get better. But what I need owners to understand when we're pushing them on and bankers, these trailing lien releases, it's not for me. It's for these companies that really need the help so that they can scale and grow and in turn drive down the cost of construction. I think we need to think about that more often. It's not just about giving people anything because these firms are earning every bit of the work that they're getting. I've been there. When I started at my company, I was the third employee. So I've seen what that feels like. So it's very personal to me in a very different way. And I want to see these companies grow and scale. And I want to get rid of those barriers that people used to put on us and that I felt and I understood what they were and why they were. And if we all think about that, again, we're going to get better pricing. Like, just if we're selfish and we're total capitalists, like, it's good for business.
Hey, what you're saying is exactly spot on. And what I have seen seen work really well is having that discussion with the construction lender at the beginning. Going, okay, we got these subs, we gotta take care of them. No, we're not gonna do this for everything, but can we do this for these folks? And think it's because it's in the community's interest. I have never said no. My organization has never said no. But it's really because, and hers might have, but yeah. It helps us to tell the story to get it. Because I do have to get pre-approval for it, okay? But I can put that in my write-up. And if I put it in my write-up, it's one issue off the table.
You could actually try to sell it as a CRA.
I do.
Initiative. As something that's creative.
Yeah.
And because the way you've articulated this, Andrew.
It's perfect.
It's perfect. But we don't often, as the lender, hear that side of the story, which I love.
Or they don't even come to us. I mean,
Right. We may just hear the ask, but we don't have all the background to understand, oh, that's what the ask is about, right? And this is something that we're kind of coming to the end of the session that's really cool about this particular conference is the theme of being collaborative and sharing information. And maybe bringing more of the team together to have the conversation. I think the lenders are often kind of held in this little room and our spreadsheets and they don't let us out very often.
yeah, the development staff, it's like, okay, I'm gonna keep you guys over here and negotiate with you. I'm gonna keep you guys over there and negotiate with you, and I'm gonna get the best thing possible. When if we just had a conversation up front, because you're exactly right. I got support, but I wouldn't do it for XYZ new developer. It's a trust in the partner.
Back to teamwork, collaboration,
And it's that trust, because you're exactly right. So all of we came to this conclusion like 2 years ago. So we always do kickoffs with all the banks. But you're right. Some developers like to keep us away from the bank, but it's like, well, we need to be collaborative. We need to be trusting. And I think when you are able to have that real conversation, every single banker we've talked to across the board has been like, oh yeah, we don't need those. Like, they're unnecessary. And I think that when you think about the end result, and I want those to be gone for everybody. It doesn't help the industry. It doesn't help us drive production. People like getting paid. I mean, imagine like your paycheck came every, 90 days. Like, you're gonna feel a different kind of way.
Kathy, can you just tell us, so you're recommending that we have that conversation at what point in the project?
The contract is done. And then it can be incorporated in my cost review that has to happen before we close on the transaction. And it can also be included in my loan agreement. I will have had enough time to get approval for my credit side and my construction monitoring side to have that in place. And my inspectors will, put that bright eye on it and we're all good. But you have to have the conversation and the developer has to ask as well.
So if I can get specific with this, maybe at the start of the due diligence process with that lender, the package goes to them, trying to line out, hey, here's our, identifying some subs that this may apply to.
Yes.
Okay, just for 1 second, for everyone online that may not have heard this conversation, before you sign your GC contract, you should
Sign that.
just
Sign.
don't even,
Good.
no. But make sure that there is language in there and there is a discussion that's had about just release of liens and various things that will impact MWESB contractors. Is that what we're suggesting?
It's usually not even those firms that slow down, because they're usually really quick with the paperwork because they want to get paid. So it's just the trend and lien releases across the board.
For all liens, I
And
understood,
that-
understood. All right. Yes, Lynn. We have a motion on the floor for. Thanks, Lynn.
We gathered the entire team, lender, investor, architect, contractor, consultant, whoever else you want to add. All right after the time that the term sheets are signed. And when we're ready to go do site inspection, at the site or wherever we want to be, everyone comes to the table and we spend a whole afternoon. In that meeting, we negotiated what are our change order limits, how are our legal releases, how are we going to fund draws. That's super early, but a lot of times those conversations don't happen until a month before close. And it's just like, oh my gosh, we could.
You mean the only time we get together shouldn't just be groundbreaking?
Early collaboration amongst all these partners. Right. And because we were all sitting around the table all at the same time super early, if there are questions about like, well, why are we asking for that? Everyone's at the table and we just talk about it. It happened on a handful of projects and I thought it was very, very effective. So I agree.
Right, that's a great suggestion. So just let me repeat really quickly. So the suggestion from our esteemed panel of lenders is that after the term sheets are signed, to have a meeting that is discussion amongst the lender, investor, architect, and contractor to go over change order limits, lien releases, how the draw is going to work, just so everyone has that expectation going in and have that discussion. It's great.
Privatizing and expediting above code programs and projects, but now you're making me think about affordable housing and above code, which all of you guys are doing. So thank you for that idea. Question, totally off topic of that. We've heard a lot in the past few years from architects about the challenges and solutions around reducing embodied carbon, both embodied and operational carbon. From the GCs, what kind of challenges and solutions have you encountered with lowering carbon?
The question is for the GC, so Martin's going to pass, I guess, about the challenges and potential solutions around lowering embodied carbon.
Well, ironically, when I was talking about one of the big cost drivers being our concrete foundations and footings, if we build really smart, I think we should be able to build with less. And that inherently will reduce the amount of just, stuff that goes into these buildings and therefore waste. So I think that is a big piece of it. Obviously, there's a lot of new technology. We're currently building the first CLT affordable housing tower, if you will. It's not, mid-rise in downtown Portland, which we're learning a lot. Hopefully that will be a replicable. I think there's a panel maybe going on right now, or it was already about really CLT use in affordable housing. So I think we're still working through that. It's still new in this use and lots to come. Technology, I'm hoping construction is an industry which in its most fundamental, we are not really doing anything that different than we have been doing for 100 years or longer. So there's lots of potential, I think, for disruption. And I'm excited to see what the next 10, 20, it probably might be 50 years, but I won't be here. But
Yeah, I think it's really planning early on in these projects. What Afton said is absolutely correct. But I'm going to go back to the earlier example of us also being when you think about these Earth Advantage or LEED or whatever it may be. I think it's not a project that we built, but I was touring one of the newer Portland public schools, and the building was incredible. I was impressed. I was going with the architect, and I was on the lower level, and I was looking at the doors. I was like, man, those are really nice doors. And being a contractor, like, you know what a door costs. Like, that's like a $3,000 door, and it was like all the way down. And they're like, yeah, unfortunately, they installed the wrong color on this floor. And I was like, oh, looks good to me. So what they were going to have, what was the cause? Every one of those doors got removed. There's nothing that can be done with those $3,000 doors. Again, it's a competitor of mine. Even I felt bad because it's a hit on them. But when we're talking about sustainability, right? Like, again, the punitive mindset of, and this wasn't the architect that was pushing it, it was the owner. And I think when we're talking about carbon footprints, and there's all these things that they spent all this money on in this building, I'm not going to name the building, but that were like, they felt so good. Like, look, we're this platinum and that this. And all I can think about is, you spent $500,000 removing doors that were perfectly good for a building that had been replaced. That was a 1950 building. Nobody would have noticed the difference. I mean, obviously the architect and the owners, but like, it's one of those things where we have to actually live those values. Because I think too often, like, we say all the things about lead this, that, whatever, but that kind of situation, and it wasn't the fault of anybody. There was some person in some place that messed up. That's all it was, right? We need to be able to look at that and like apply some lens of sustainability to those kind of situations so that we're not pulling out those doors, wasting all that money. Because no matter, even if it comes out of the contractor, it's still like it's a waste. So that's something that I think we need to do a better job of, like, as a group that talks about being sustainable. It's like also be like, bring that human element to it as well.
Well, no. He'd be laughing if it was. Yeah, to kind of mirror on that or expand on that, same thing with the life cycle of whatever products you're putting in the building. We've done a ton of occupied renovations. We've seen a lot of products that were replaced earlier than they should need to be. So I'm always a proponent at looking at how long is anything going to last? How durable is it going to be? Because there's nothing sustainable about replacing something twice as often as you would need to do something else. So making sure we're keeping an eye on that. And I don't know how Martin got off the hook on this question because we just put in whatever he tells us to.
I was going to take it anyway. At the architecture side, it's really hard. We've been fighting, it feels like, for the last decade to get more transparency from our reps on the product selections and the things we put in your buildings. And we've just gotten to the point where everyone feels like they're actually getting us the information we kind of want. And now we're asking for it to be standardized so we can make those kinds of selections between, flooring 1 and flooring 2. It's not just about hitting Earth Advantage or LEED. In some benchmark, it's about thinking about the indoor air quality and healthy materials and the life cycle. Is like, are we going to have to replace this in 5 years? Is it going to last 10? What's it going to look like in terms of the mills and the embodied carbon? And just anecdotally, I had a friend from my alma mater reach out last week and say, hey, you're an architect. I work for a startup in California. We're doing a database beta to track embodied carbon and materials. Are you interested? I was like, yes. I very much so am. It's like, if you're willing to release the beta to me, I'm happy to look at it and see what's in there and what I could use and what my colleagues in my office can take for it. So we're excited about where it's going. It's just very, very difficult because the onus is not on all the generals. I do appreciate all of the common sense reductions, reuse, don't throw away the baby with the bathwater stuff. That's 100% true. But until we can get into the weeds and actually look at the carbon rates for every single piece of product we're putting in the buildings, we're not going to be able to move the whole mountain.
One more question, maybe? We solved it all. Jennifer Hoffman, what is up?
It's really hard to get to that point where we could be ready to proceed when no one has the money to pay for it. So that would be one thing. If I had a magic wand, I would say the money is there early enough for the team to work together to be able to get the answers early enough to be able to predict the price of the project, have less risk.
So you are the person in the room that is giving a comment and not a question.
Yeah.
It was a great one. Success. Well, is there anyone in the room that wants to talk about, I guess, the challenge of getting more pre-dev money and maybe things that they've been successful in getting pre-dev money for their projects? Any of the lenders have thoughts on that? Oh my gosh, you're letting us down. Yeah. Yeah, Kathy already solved one problem, so like she's out now.
Debt loans that they take out so dang, and one free debt loan of $1.5 million or 2 million wipes out their liquidity. And so it really has to, a loan is not a good word for it. It is, there's got to be a way to have it be more great for you.
Kate, did you have a? You can do it. You can do it.
And it's been a big theme, as you know, we've talked about the loss of housing and just, you know, a lot of the struggles that our nonprofit affordable housing partners are going through right now, and that the greater financial health of our state's housing developers, the more they can weather a little bit of risk. So I think it's if we can invest in just the overall health of all of the organizations that are trying to do this big work. And so it's so many different types of funding. It's the asset management above the line. It's all of these things will just make for much more resilient organizations that then can weather a little bit more risk in this pre-development. So it's all so connected.
I think we're at time. Thank you all. This has been fun. Appreciate all the work that everyone does in this room. Thank you so much.